Stereo, my chicken enjoyers, because the Patreon reward for 2025 has come through. I have them in hand right here, these cold foil chicken Quicken alt arts, but I'm on the road for Vegas with them in hand, so I can't quite ship them out until next week. So if you want to go ahead and be some of the first to receive these wonderful cold foil Quicken chicken alt arts and support the channel and all the projects we have here with Levia and Budget Bash, please sign up for the Patreon. It's $5 and I ship worldwide. As I said, I'm unfortunately on the road right now, so I can't even show you this beautiful Levia deck in max rarity in person, but there is a new max rarity card that we added to the deck that makes Levia super exciting and makes it worth sharing this deck as quick as possible with you guys. And that is Sea Legs, a new addition from High Seas that is a generic, but is alarmingly good in brutes across the board. That's a couple reasons. First of all, yellow, 6, block 3. Checks a lot of boxes for kind of this filler role that smooths out a lot of brute decks, with this added ability that when it's discarded, it's going to create a Goldkiss Rum token. And Goldkiss Rum gives you access to Go Again. And Go Again is something that Levia, more than other brutes even, can use for really strong, effective hands that curve oh so well with rate. She's already pushing for 2 cost into 1 cost follow-ups like Dread into Graveling. The more access you can get to those curves of now, like a Hungering with Gogan into Graveling, still feel exactly as good as that initial 3-card 12 with Dread Screamer. But the fact that this is Go Again that sticks on the board, unlike Agility, which you could generate from Smashback Hailhorn or Agile Windup, means that you get to decide exactly when you want to cash in the Go Again. Is it for that on-rate turn that Levi is used to? Do you save it for post-consume to force a 4-wide Blood Rush with Go Again now stapled to the board? Do you use Go Again to still push some kind of turn into a redeemed flip when otherwise a redeemed flip normally is a Go Again lacking turn? The whole tap mechanic attached to Goldkiss Rum is not too important for Levia, because this is the only thing that is going to be interacting with tapping your hero. So the only limitation here is that you can't Goldkiss Rum twice back to back. You will have to wait that turn to untap since you're not a pirate, and then you could tap again. But you only have 2 opportunities to even generate Goldkiss Rum with a count of probably 2 Sea Legs and Revise in these refined Levia lists. So to end up with 2 is already not likely in the first place because this is a discard effect, a little bit random, and to stack them turn to turn, just something that you would have to realize you can't do anyway. So this card is quite exciting, and we're injecting it into a Levia list that is honestly pretty solved at this point, but there are a couple edits that we get to make to lean in to the discard outlet that we're looking for to get the Sea Legs to trigger. So the main thing, right, we're calling this list Blood Drunk 2.0. We're chasing that high. We want to discard Sea Legs, but we want to do it around a shell that we know works. So there's really not too many surprises on the armor front. We're going to take a look here at kind of the default list, and I actually did add a lot of sideboard choices for anyone who wants to take the link and try jamming this on Talishar. A lot of the people in the League of Levia have been testing this already, some in prep for US Nationals, and been having a lot of fun with it. So hopefully this helps. We're going to take a look at the deck more on this macro skill first. So of course we're including very heavy armor that Levia oh so loves. She wants to play this aggressive playstyle, but her armor is really what makes that worth doing in the first place. The more aggressive you can be with your hand, the better the armor is that you can use to pivot and ignore having to block. In these shorter games, there is higher value implicitly on armor instead of using cards to block, because in a shortened game, now the impact of blocking with a Carrion Husk is that much higher than if the game was drawn out and you would want to be blocking multiple times. So we want heavy armor, and Levia is perfect at that, including Apex Bonebreaker, Carrion Husk, of course, Mandible Claws, Scabskin Leathers, and Scowling Fleshbag. Now, the core of the list looks pretty similar to almost every Levia deck at this point. I think we know what her really good reds are, but there's a couple tweaks I've made to the ratios that I'm bringing into every matchup that do synergize a little bit better with what the Sea Legs type of build is chasing. The first thing to note is that Endless Maw isn't actually a staple 3 of for the way this deck is built. And I know this card is fantastic. These 2-card 9 rates in Levia are very, very strong, but we are including more of the draw discard package again. Obviously Wild Ride, which I think comes in all the time, but also pulping in the sideboard. And pulping is more playable in this upcoming metagame than in the previous one, because I do expect a lot of D-reacts to slowly fade out of decks. Now we won't be running into like 12 count D-react decks. Some of the new decks won't run any, like the likes of Marlin and Puffin really shouldn't be on D-reacts, I don't think. And even into Gravy Bones, you can run pulpings just directly into allies. You don't worry about them actually being able to stop the go again. So by leading into the draw discard package again, that actually forces a lot of reds into these slots that just don't have synergy with what the Endless Maw playstyle lends itself to, which is to be able to block and then catch back up on that rate by returning a 2-card 9. When you have more of the draw discard package, these hands get a little bit forced. Your arsenal gets a little bit forced as well because of the possibility of drawing multiples of these red non-block 2-cost attacks that don't pay into each other. But it's an accepted risk of playing this type of deck because there is a lot of power in including the draw discards. For one, it increases the ceiling drastically on what damage Levia can deal, and also how soon she can deal it in a game, instead of relying so much on graveyard fill to actually get you in these positions to be able to throw your go again that comes off the back of like Dread Screamer and Horror. And speaking of Horror, Horror has an incredible ceiling when you're filling your graveyard more consistently with 6s and 6s with go again, like Wild Ride and Pulping. You have a Wild Ride turn to begin with, a Pulping turn to begin with, and then follow that up next turn with the Shadow Realm Horror that hits the Pulping again. Holy crap, you can just dump insane value off the back of comboing these go again attacks all together to then end with some final chain ender, maybe a swing big, maybe just a claw swing as well. We're not running ball breaker like lists of old, but either way, that's the kind of dedication we're putting in the build to accepting that, yes, up to 6 counts in some matchups of these draw discards, these red 2-cost non-blocks, just means that Endless Maw does not fit quite nicely into that cost curve. But including 1 is a good idea still. It can be a bit of that comeback mechanic. Of course, if you flip with it, that is an incredible power play. Block 3 cards, 1 card return, 9 value off consumed. You cannot ignore how strong that is. Now, the rest of the reds are the cards that I pretty much have seen in every Levia deck at this point. Boneyard Marauder, Dread Screamer, Shadow Realm Horror, Swing Big, Wild Ride. The inclusion that I am pretty sure stays in this version of the deck is 1 red Savage Feast. And this is because it's another guaranteed way to discard from hand. Not discard top of deck, which sometimes you can get lucky with Sea Legs, but at least a discard from hand outlet that kind of works twofold with Sea Legs, either to discard it in the first place or to enable Goldkiss Rum to now have a really prime activator for your whole hand. 1 of Savage Feast feels like it's not too greedy. It's the right spot of, okay, it's flexible. If anything, it's just maybe going to block 3. If anything, it's just another 6 I can discard. And if anything, the curve of it being a 1-cost 6 is still great for these follow-ups after Wild Rides, after Shadow Realm Horrors, when you have 1 resource floating off of a blue. If you have that extra 6 in hand, you can just cycle it, an extra graveyard fill, and still a really strong rate, effectively a 3-card 12. You need to have 4 cards to have done it, but you're resetting that 4th card back in Arsenal. So I think 1 of is just a really safe spot for this card. It's hard to hate it at 1. I was trying it at 2, trying it at 3 to really lean into the Sea Legs playstyle, and that's where you start to run into issues. But at 1, really, really happy with it. So then we look at the yellows, and I think the yellows also are at a point where you're seeing this in almost every Levia deck. It's Beast Within, which is our best friend, mainly because of Call to the Grave these days. My God, this card is fantastic, coupled with Call to the Grave, especially with the heavy draw discard builds. You can arsenal a Call to the Grave, don't forget this, and then when you draw into that pulping hand, if you want to increase your odds of having a 6 in hand for the go again, or to make sure that you're turning off Blood Debt preemptively, you just play the Call to the Grave in your arsenal to go ahead, get that Beast Within. Now you have a 5-card hand that is all 6s basically, and Blood Debt already off. So really, really solid card. For that, we want 6 Beast Within, and if this card said unlimited on it, I probably would run maybe even 6, but it doesn't. So instead, we've kind of got our backup Beast Within in Mark of the Beast, and then that same cost curve following into Hungering Slaughter Beast, then our very solid 1-cost 6 option, Graveling Growl, Blood Rush Bellow, don't need to talk about that too much, but then also mainboarding 1 Deep-Rooted Evil yellow. That's because, kind of harkening back to the old builds of full aggro Levia, that actually does really well in Blitz currently is with this strategy of our recursion piece is not really a game plan piece, it's a ceiling piece. We just dump Deep-Rooted Evil either turn 0 with Call to the Grave, or we're casually discarding it from all of our other effects, and then it's just going to sit there, and when it comes up, we get to turn 1 blue into 6 damage. And that is an incredible rate for an aggro deck, but it's not quite tied to a cost curve or recursive playstyle turn by turn that a Howl from Beyond might play into. So just in this 6 attack filler role anyway, leaning into the draw discards, I've really liked it just mainboard in the deck, and I haven't run into issues with it all too much, because if anything, it's still a yellow, so it will just pay in to one of the reds that you're trying to play anyway. And with this heavier yellow lineup, you kind of see again that we're not always able to even block down and play out Endless Maw anyway. We want more of those 2-cost attacks that feel good to return potentially on a 2-card hand, like Shadow Realm Horror, like Swing Big, or even just a Wild Rider Pulping if our hand is kind of forced that way, hence the stronger yellow count. Then, of course, we also have Sea Legs added back to the list. This one, you don't play it, you just really hope to discard it. And does it come up every game? No. Do you want it to come up every game? Absolutely. When it does come up, you feel so far ahead, so much more in control of the match. And for just 2 slots in your deck list, that's not really taxing too much of the other ways that you want to build your deck. I think that's just a solid spot. I wouldn't really run 3. I don't think the discard outlets we have are reliable enough to want to go to 3. There's no synergy with Call to the Grave, for example. Call to the Grave on Sea Legs does not give us the Goldkiss Rum. Maybe if the meta was heavier on discard effects, like if pummels were everywhere, then maybe 3 Sea Legs could do something, because it does count discarded at all, even to your opponent's effects. So perhaps like if Icelander was back, right? If Icelander was hidden in high seas like everyone was speculating, then yeah, sure, discard this to an Aether Ice Vein, and that actually would have done something. So it's nice to know that it's flexible going forward in the future. Discarding might be something we need to worry about versus what we're facing now with like new is more this banish from hand tax rather than discarding. So could come up to want to be a 3 of, I just don't think right now. Then we've got the blue base. We already talked about Call to the Grave, best blue we could ever ask for. We've also got some added spice of these more second cycle oriented blues. I like these a lot right now because you churn through your deck quite a bit faster with draw discards and can flip pretty aggressively into Blazafet Levi Consumed. But what do you do once you actually flip? You want some more insurance in your blue base that the game actually ends. So just the reliability of, okay, we've got Dominate coming up. We know we can play into it, end the game straight up. Some redundancy in even having pulpings that can do that as well. Feels like a really good spot for Convulsions right now. You can lean into like Barraging Beatdown, of course, is another great 3-block 0-cost blue. But in second cycle, it demands you to hold a little bit of a larger hand to feel great. Whereas if you flip Consumed, then you can generally just keep 2 cards and win off of that. It can be a blue Convulsions, it can be another blue, and then with a 1 cost from your Consume play, you just come in with a 7 power Dominate, just like that. Whereas Barraging means you need to keep basically 4 cards to pull that up, or 3, plus 1 from Consumed. So it just feels like a little bit more dependable right now because you are trading off your ability to block super well with adding more draw discards, and that can kind of put your life total in situations where when you can't block early, maybe you have to block late, you just don't have that much control over where your life total exactly is over all points of the game. Then we've also got Unworldly Bellow. This is some more added redundancy in blues being able to turn off Blood Debt, especially if you don't get to go Consumed. And really, it's just the 1 cost here that makes it feel better than adding like that 3rd copy of Convulsions, for example, because this can at least get played on top of some of your 2 costs, like Wild Rides and Pulpings, that might be forced plays because they are non-blocks. So you get to just come in for what's not great, 3-card 8, maybe, with this curving on a blue into one of those attacks. But if it's a Pulping with Dominate, like maybe that works out as well. So it's just a more on-curve way to turn off Blood Debt in your blue base. Then you've got your 6s, Deadwood Rumbler, and Wrecker Up. We kind of just run those because we have to. They say 6. Soul Harvest, same deal. Doomsday, fantastic. And there's actually a mini combo we're going to touch on later in some of these new cards that came out in High Seas. But the main thing that I know a lot of people are going to grumble at is that I am running Iva Fidia again. And that's because the draw discards are back. They're back, and with extra discard payoff in Sea Legs, I really feel like I'm getting so much value out of opting, whether it's controlling the draw in some capacity on a large hand just to increase the odds of getting, that 6 in hand, or if it's on a small hand to guarantee that you're discarding off the top something very specific like Beast Within, like Sea Legs. These are very small percentages. They don't come up in every game. And if you don't own an eye, please don't go buy one just for this deck. Play into the randomness of draw discard, and it's not so bad. But if you have one, it actually feels pretty cool to be able to opt and stack your deck in this capacity. If you don't have one, I would just run 2 Sigil of Cycles. This is kind of my choice for a bit more proactivity in your 0-cost blue slot. The barraging play is nice, but Sigil of Cycles fills your graveyard +2. You play it, you discard a card, and this goes to grave as well. That's 1 card spent from hand, basically, on a previous turn to fill your graveyard +2, which gives you a lot more control over your own proactivity in graveyard fill, which some matchups can struggle in. Honestly, it's less now than before. Like, stack flooring isn't really a thing, so Sigil of Cycles, honestly, not all that important, but it's only a one-of in my current version of the build, so it's hard to really hate on cards that are one-ofs because they don't make an impact in every single game. But, feel free to explore more in that barraging space. That's definitely still the next most premium blue 0-cost. So then we look at the inventory here, and this is where the 55 card main board truly doesn't get touched in almost any capacity. I think every once in a while a blue swaps out here and there. But the sideboard is really what comes in to fill those last spaces to bring us up to 60. And we have all the sideboard buttons for you to click through and take Catalitar, basically. But we'll talk through it here in general sense. The other 2 Endless Maws, we're never not running triple Endless Maw in some capacity. When we're going on that full aggro plan, bringing in the pulpings, and bringing in some of this yellow count, right? That would take us up to the extra 5 cards we're looking for, up to 60. But when we're not taking pulpings, because it is a more D-React-centric matchup like Verdance or Florian, for example, then we want to take in the Endless Maws, take in the Howl from Beyond, and take in the Agile Windups. That gives us those 5 cards we're looking for to get up to 60, and doesn't have us playing into defense reactions. Instead, we can lean a little bit more into replaying that Howl from Beyond and getting more go again from the agility generators. But into aggressive matchups, the pulping and the send packing just does wonders there. Send packing is still a fantastic card to include in this yellow base. It's very flexible, and it gives you a really good turn going second, potentially, some disruption, or ways to use that might from Apex Bonebreaker in a way that is actually disruptive to your opponent because of that added breakpoint. So if you can do it on a flip turn, that's best case, but either way, a little bit of disruption can go a long way in Levia sometimes, because people don't really expect disruption out of Levia. Sometimes they stack armor in weird ways because of this, so a little bit of punish can go a long way. Some of the other cards we have here are Guardian of the Shadow Realm. This is really because I think Azalea is a massive threat in the meta right now, and this is one of our auto-win cards against Azalea. That matchup can be tough. If they go first and just smack you, you're definitely going to be behind. But one of the ways you can equally just make the game feel unfair, but for their side, is to get a Guardian banished and then save all your armor just around flipping perfectly. Once you flip, Guardian of the Shadow Realm gets around things like Dominate, because it's being played from your banish zone, not from your hand, and it just lets you turn, 1 card into blocking 6, which is absolutely wild. It lets you play 2 of these Blood Deck cards per 1 turn cycle, which can launch you ahead in the end game when you and the Azalea should be pretty low life. You'll be at 13, hopefully she'll be somewhere around there as well. Then we've also got 1 Arcane Compliance. This is a bit of a flex slot. I was running Tunic in this slot before, more for Florian, but most Florians right now are leaning a little bit more aggressive. They're on this mid-range build, but actually a more aggressive mid-range. You can't call it aggro because they're never going to build exactly like that, but a more aggressive mid-range. So instead of opting for Tunic in that matchup, I've brought in 1 Arcane Compliance because it's a pretty easy blue swap over Doomsday for matchups like Acilio and Kano, where you're never getting to Doomsday. The game doesn't go long enough. You don't really get to block enough with your Blood Deck cards anyway to then, or block or play them, to even get them and banish to get there. Doomsday is just a unplayable card in those matchups. They're too short. So you can sub that in for the Arcane Compliance, which will have impact in some capacity, either as a replacement of what was already a blue non-block, or something you can actually park in Arsenal. And my goodness, into Acilio can feel like you just win the game on the spot. You already have Fleshbag and some darkness pieces, which can help in that matchup. But this is huge there. Into Kano, after they wildfire you, you can Arcane Compliance to make sure that their Surge effect that wants to draw cards just doesn't work, and then they kind of just teeter out. So I like one, and like I said, you're bringing it into matchups where it was just straight replacing a card that was not getting played, matches the stats otherwise. Then for the equipment, we've got some darkness pieces. These are, of course, mainly for Kano, but I do take the boots into Acilio, for example. This is just our own version of Spell Void, so, counts against the total damage that Blazing Aether would end up receiving from, like, Aether Wildfire, yada yada. That's kind of the whole shtick there. Then we've got Hooves of the Shadow Beast. This one I bring in to some of the more mid-rangey matchups where you're not all-out racing. The extra block value of Scabs isn't worth as much in the longer game, believe it or not. Maybe against very specific hit effects, like in Assassins, you still bring the Scab skins, but otherwise you can get away with Hooves and really push for that, honestly, impact that a Goldkiss Rum would have as well, right? This, like, control over this turn I get go again, which with all the damage that Levia can deal can be pretty impactful when you turn what is otherwise like a 6 damage hand into 12, 12 to 18, on and on. Just control over that feels quite good. Then we've got Nullrune Gloves and Spoiled Skull. These are the AB pieces that I'm taking alongside the Darkness pieces into Kano, but you also get a lot of mileage of Nullrune and Spoiled Skull into Florian and Verdance as well. I like the duality, the two AB pieces rather, because into Verdance, it gives you protection over, pitching a blue when they kind of do like a Spell Waning Moon combo, you're going to get full value of blocking 3 anyway. If it's the Surge weapon, even better, pitch 2 and then 1 on the follow-up. But into Florian, specifically, the 2AB was strong into Scepter, but it's still strong into current Florian because it lets you use Spoiled Skull proactively. This is a really solid effect once you find your Wild Rides, once you find Screamer, once you find Horror or Blood Rush, you can just punch the Spoiled Skull ticket, try to get yourself to another Blood Rush or at least some kind of extender, and that can be massive in a matchup like Florian where you want to make sure you're not missing a turn of go again, basically. But once you do that, you would lose your Arcane Barrier. So having Nullrune Gloves as a backup option leaves you then open to potentially flipping into Redeemed and not just like automatically losing the game to Rune Chance. You still have coverage and can actually fatigue out a Florian sometimes from those end states, especially now without Germinate. If they are blocking a ton on that first cycle, get them into the grind state, flip Redeemed. Now, when they try to just fatigue you out with Weapon and Rune Chance, you don't lose cards from deck at any like change rate. You're at parity there. You're pitching an AB, you're blocking 3, and then on your return you can just claw. And if you are up on cards, which you should be because they block more than you do, you just kind of win those game states. It's a weird way to play, for sure, but it actually does come up. So having an extra Arcane Barrier piece just lets that happen at all, basically. And then we have Savage Sash, which is amazing when you do go for the double draw discard route in a lot of those racing matchups. Savage Sash helps smooth out those turns where you do draw multiple of the draw discards. You just shrug it off, throw your hands, all of a sudden a blue pays for like 3 of these suckers, for example, a yellow pays for 2, and you just go kind of nuts. So Savage Sash, absolutely fantastic. And how often do we need to talk about the Demi-Hero? It's still the best thing Levia can do, but, the games that you have with Levia are not determined on whether or not you go consumed or redeemed or even at all, right? You want to stay flexible with this card. I think going all in on flipping is still not worth it. I've lost a game recently on stream where I opted into consumed when I had clearer lines, just play into recursion value. And, if I'm still making those mistakes, certainly people out there are as well. But there are some matchups where maybe you are most comfortable knowing that consumed is achievable. I must go that route. One that I can tell you that is Azalea. Azalea is the kind of matchup where you need to win off of consumed, because otherwise the Guardian line doesn't really get value, and you absolutely can start drowning in arrows, and you might just lose the game off that. So the better line is to force consumed, use your armor that way. But if you are playing into a Syndra, for example, and feel like, oh, it's consumed or bust, you block your entire hand just so you can get a consumed playoff, by doing that, you didn't return anything back. And the Syndra now just has a full card hand to smack you, and you're guaranteed at 13. You probably don't win that game. Because remember, your return is never really going to be disruption, especially if you're doing small card returns after consume. It's not like you can play a send packing back. So just remember, stay open-minded about how you're using consumed. More than anything, redeemed is the option I want you to not forget about. I think it can come up a lot, especially like that fatigue state in Florian that I mentioned. Believe it or not, those game states can be very real unexpectedly. So just look for that, right? Keep your game plans open. And beyond that, I think there is still experimenting overall that can be done with Levia in high seas. There are some other cards that she got, or other cards in the metagame that might be relevant. One thing, right, is the Tunic for the Florian Invertence matchup, like I mentioned. Another thing is like the second Sigil of Cycles over the Eye of Ophidia, or maybe even something's out entirely for the Barraging Beatdowns. But another interesting blue 0-cost block 3 is Chains of Mephetis, and this one actually stands out quite a bit if Marlin, Puffin, and Gravy are top heroes. Those decks all inherently draw a lot more than what we've previously seen in the game. By forcing those draws to get banished can negate all kinds of synergy, right? You're taking away the pitch ability of Gravy when he's searching for those blues. You're making Puffin all of a sudden either play more face up or miss out on how she was trying to set up Arsenal for these better turns with optimal cog setups. Or Marlin just negating how she can even play 3 of a kind, right? So Chains of Mephetis is quite interesting. It's a bit more of an incidental blue. I don't think it's much of a game plan blue, but it can slot in to the Levi deck very easily. You can search out with Call to the Grave turn 0 if you've got nothing better to do with it. It does block 3 still, and then after all the extra Gogan that you have in your deck, do the Wild Rides and Pulpings. If those turns end up being like Dread, Wild Ride, Claw, right, because that all curves off of 2 blues, what were you doing with the Go-Again? Well, you can just go ahead and play Chains of Mephetis, and maybe it gets value in that matchup. Because the one thing to note with Chains of Mephetis, remember, we haven't really played with it much as Levia players, but we control when it breaks. So if it's going to be detrimental to us, like we draw our Blood Rush hand, then we just decide not to remove the Doom counter and just let it break. And then we can just play our turn anyway. So we actually have control over this. It's never really going to nuke us the way that we want it to affect our opponent, right? So that's an interesting card to test out with. But overall, I think some heroes still need to LL a little bit more, right? Like New needs to leave, Azalea needs to leave, and then more than anything, Chains maybe makes more of an impact. There's just a little bit too many heroes going on for me to want Chains in the deck right now. Now, the spiciest new card, but also one that like really does not shine right now, is Bandana of the Blue Beyond. So shout out to some Hexagore Brewers, I believe it was Jesse on the Discord, who pointed this out. But this is actually the first way we've ever had to recur Doomsday. Now, people in the Levia Discord, I don't know why they can't comprehend this, but they've been begging that Doomsday had Blood Debt itself. Now, that's insanely broken. Plenty of reasons, but one of the main ones is that you'd be able to play it back out with Levia consumed, right? Once per turn, you could just play out a card with Blood Debt. Oh, yeah, sure. My card with Blood Debt this turn, why not? Doomsday, I'll double up on Plasma, no problem. And if it was banished, that means you already played it once. So that would be a way the community is asking for to be able to summon 2 Plasma Fets in a single game. And that already sounded ridiculous. Like, no way we were getting there. But now we actually can get there with a couple of hoops. Because Bandana of the Blue Beyond says, discard a card, destroy this, put a blue card, not action card specifically, but blue card from your graveyard to the bottom of the deck. So Doomsday, even though it's an instant, is just a blue card. And this as a discard outlet means cards like Beast Within, cards like Sea Legs would still trigger, when this is discarded. That's all it cares about, right? So you have plays with Bandana of the Blue Beyond that aren't strictly negative, like the discard a card thing, you would plus in some sense. It's either going to be the Beast Within, right, turns off Blood Debt, draws you a card, or the Sea Legs, where now you're getting a Goldkiss Rum with some control over it, and of course filling the graveyard with the Bandana plus the 6 that you discard, getting back a Doomsday as the ceiling. Now, that is really unique. I don't think it's good at all with the current state of the game, but if we got back to an old him meta, some like hyper fatigue meta. This is crazy. Like, this is an amazing toolkit card for Levia. I think back to how the Oldhim matchups of old used to play out. I would have played double Doomsday in some games. In fact, I might have had double Blazofed out on the same time in some scenarios. Like, imagine you are in like a hyper fatigue state, mill the hell out of your deck. You know the next hand that you're going to draw up. You play out Doomsday. You crack Bandana with the sea legs. Put
Right.
Doomsday on the bottom. Your opponent like can't kill the Blazofed because they're like Oldhim or something. Your next hand, you draw back up the Doomsday again. You play the Doomsday. You get double Blazofed. You sea legs, or rather Goldkiss Rum at that point, to give the Blazofed go again, attack with the other Blazofed. You're now like on 12 damage for 0 cards. It's like, it's not consistent. It's not even like the goal of what you should necessarily be going for, but to know that it is possible is very, very interesting. So I'm glad that the brews are cooking. They're coming through here. I'm smelling something. I just don't think it's coming through at this particular point. What we can do instead is try to drink as much Goldkiss Rum as possible, earn our sea legs on the high seas, and play Levia in a version that is proven consistent, proven to be one of the better aggressive decks right now with toolbox options to play more into mid-range. So with that, let's get into some gameplay. Hope you enjoy. And we've got a Levia versus Gravy Bones match, and this one actually took a bit of finagling with the equipment suite to figure out what works best. But pretty much what I've decided on here is that Carrion Husk is the way to go. In this version, I was still on Tunic, but Carrion Husk helps block specifically against the Conqueror of the High Seas. So the ability to just throw armor in front of that adds a bit more consistency to your own game plan as you get to ignore theirs. The one downside, though, is they tend to just follow up with a Command and Conquer after the Conqueror of the High Seas. So it almost makes you want to run the Flesh Bag as well because of that worst case scenario, but it just doesn't happen often enough that I value taking that over the consistency of Spoiled Skull. So we are going second here, and we are the aggressor, and we also always, by Levi's own mechanics, care about graveyard fill. So that hand was a little bit forced in, honestly, a way that wouldn't necessarily always pan out, because if we end up with no attack after the Claw Swings, well, it was a bit of a wasted Blood Rush, but we built our deck to have a lot of playable attacks, so we are just basically trusting that the way we've built our list will let us even play a Blood Rush going second. If you're on a more mid-range list, or if you're not citing in the pulpings, for example, then you just couldn't take that line. Playing a Blood Rush would absolutely waste it, versus the way we played it, we can assume our deck will draw in a way where it is still playable. So now on the return, Gravy Bones ate all that damage. It's really shortening the game, which is great to see. But at the same time, they have accumulated quite the board state. 3 allies, and Sawbones specifically tends to be pretty annoying. You have to clear him. It's not the hardest thing to clear when you have the ability to swing claws plus other attacks. So the way we drew this up works beautifully. We are going to go for just a clear turn rather than throw that swing big at face. This is mainly because if you take the opportunity to clear Chowder early, then hey, he only gained 2 life for Gravy, but it's still pretty crazy that he immediately on Summon of Chowder gains that 2 value. If we let him around for even one more turn, he's beyond singular card value. Now he's pushing for 3 or 4 on this resummon that was effectively free. So we just want to clear that before it gets too scary. And by putting a swing big in Arsenal before we even have Blood Debt, keeps us pretty adaptable in terms of how we get to play out our non-banishers. So now the agility looks a little bit wasted here, but that's the difference between playing for agilities and the Goldkiss Rums, is that the agilities you don't have much control over, but they are easier to generate, versus the Goldkiss Rum, which you can only create through sea legs, basically, but it sticking on the board would give you so much sticking power. And actually, look at this. Immediately what we called out in the beginning of the game, with how CNC is always followed by CNC, does unfortunately come to bear here. But with our equipment suite, plus the flexibility of our hand being able to block, That's actually part of the beauty of these draw discards is you don't have to say no blocks on everything. Like you can scale these hands down. The fact that it was an arsenal with this double blue means we could, in theory, push for a 3-card 12. I didn't want to risk the pulping blind like that because the Doubted Rumbler would not be a solid arsenal target if that's what we ended up keeping in arsenal if they stuffed it. So throwing the pulping at the ally instead guarantees that we can at least pitch away the follow-up if it is that Deadwood. Got a little bit unlucky because we didn't hit the guaranteed go again, but that's why it was into an ally, right? So then we follow up with Scabs just because we're going to pitch that Deadwood away anyway. Let's go ahead and try to double claw at face, and we do get there. But now Gravy Bones develops a pesky board. These ones are really tough to want to clear because they give Gravy Bones a gold, and they're also very tough for Levia to clear without wasting so much more damage elsewhere. They're one life, those little Oystons, but for us, the smallest attack we can throw is realistically the Claw Swing, and the Claw Swing would otherwise take an entire card away. Now, the choice also being leaving the Oystons on the board means they attack back for free, which is also 3 value, so you just hope that the game can be short enough that the trade in leaving Oystons alive for multiple turns doesn't actually outvalue the 3 damage you're presenting at face instead. But it's tough. It's actually really tough. So there we go. We've just ignored the Oyston board, and now Chum, off the back of this Call to the Grave, is looking beyond easy to set up for Gravy here. And Chum is an annoying one. Very, very annoying. But one of the things you can do to try to get around Chum is to block with Apex into a Blood Rush turn. I know it sounds very specific, but you can wait on a Blood Rush and Arsenal quite a bit into the Gravy matchup. You can try to do the Park Blood Rush, wait for double Blood Rush turn. It's kind of tough because they're going to be developing board. But if you're just waiting on Blood Rush anyway, easy answer to clear on that singular return is to block with Apex, get a Might, and that way your first swing is for 6. And that's exactly what lines up here. It's our easy clear on Chum. Everything else on a Blood Rush turn just isn't going to look that pretty, but on our in-between turns, it's actually quite easy to clear a Chum, right? We can just swing like a Dread Screamer or a Horror or Pulping, Wild Ride, anything like that, and it'll feel pretty good. It's just specifically when it lines up into Blood Rush, you need to be able to block with Apex, or you just should not go for the Blood Rush. You're going to waste so much damage into the Chum. So just heads up tip for that line, folks. Now it passes back over, and look at the value on these Oystons. They are just sitting pretty. This singular Oyston, I believe it's the first attack of an Oyston, but that's already now a trade that I have made. I threw a Claw at face instead of an Oyston. Now the Oyston has thrown back, so we are even on my decision at this point. If I sack Claw again, I'm behind because that's another 3 wasted damage. And if he swings at me again, then I'm like 2 cards behind basically. So just looking very tough to have left those in play. So this turn on our end, it was all kind of weird. We ended up arseling the Beast Within. This is mostly a matchup thing. Gravy Bones, especially this version of Gravy Bones, we've now seen run both versions of CNC. Not every Gravy runs Command and Conquer, but they do run Conqueror of the High Seas. So since we've seen that come up, I have parked a Beast Within an arsenal under the assumption that since my armor is gone anyway, the next time that they attack me with one of these Arsenal Destroy effects, I want to get some, card advantage out of it, basically. So now we go for, luckily, with a Beast with an Arsenal, Beast with an hand, we still had one in deck. We can go ahead, make sure Blood Debt is off to now thin out what was effectively 2 non-6s in hand. We burned the Call to the Grave, replace it with a 6. Now we get to pitch I Have a Video, which guarantees how we are going to basically hit off of the top. And we end up even discarding the Deeper Evil, which is actually not best case because we had the Beast Within, so we could have drawn an extra card, but it would have been at the cost of losing the flip guaranteed. Into Gravy, I'm not convinced the flip always works. They can end up pretty defensive, especially if they're sitting on a bit of gold. They can actually block very well, but we only have 2 Blood Debt. So actually, there's no world where we really fatigue from making the consume choice in this game. We just have a little bit more game to get there at this point. So now we've got options. The one thing I'm waiting for, though, is I don't really want to flip without prime choices on Spoiled Skull. If you flip too early without Spoiled Skull targets, it's a bit wasted. So we go for the Deadwood Rumbler and just kind of take an extra second to pause on what our decision will be. The Spoiled Skull can see right now a Swing Big and a Blood Rush, which are unique beyond what we'd be able to play out anyway. And our Deadwood Rumbler then hits, which at this point I think does give us enough of a tipping point in what our banishes would be that we go ahead and flip, because now there's 2 guaranteed go agains in there with the, or I guess only the 1 guaranteed go again now with that Blue Dread Screamer, but it's a easy flip in this case, a little bit of card advantage, and our Spoiled Skull still should look pretty live. So now we come through. It is a dominate play, but it does not mean we necessarily win. Gravy Bones does run defense reactions, and if you look at how thin their deck is here, I mean, look at this. The Gravy Bones deck is turboing through their deck, is one thing you have to notice. Yes, we mill a little bit, but Gravy Bones mills a lot. So if you count the amount of D-Reacts they've seen, I think they'd only seen maybe 1 of their D-React, so it is pretty likely that they had one, and they're actually running Shelters in addition too. So this is one of the things to remember. We do run Pulping in this matchup, not really because we want to throw it at Gravy, but because we want to throw it at his allies. It's a very Dromai-esque situation. So now that we know he's running Shelters, it's just something else to be aware of in making those decisions with Pulping, as we do draw up 1 more. But the board at this point, I mean, the board is scary. It's pretty significant. He hasn't drawn ways to go overwhelmingly wide, is the only thing we're happy about at this point. But he's still throwing scary numbers on small card hands and threatening to reach a point in the game where I don't have much control over the tempo anymore. He can just block and swing back. So it really comes down to how does the card in deck angle affect his decisions on blocking or not. We know that he pitched some allies back in, right? So there will be these non-block hands coming up. Can we survive in like this counter fatigue angle? But this is like another really beautiful use of how Sawbones and Shelter and all this just adds for pretty decent defense. My 2 attempts at dominated attacks to close out the game just have not worked, and this is what we were scared of. A small hand from Gravy having go again. So the flying high now means he gets a swing in, but the tap on the Sawbones is honestly pretty huge. The tap on the Sawbones means we're not threatened with this extra 6 attack for free. It's going to be the smaller attacks, but Cuddy Shark adding that passive damage to the board here means, look at that, they actually were able to present lethal. So we had a Goldkiss Rum from our discard on the previous turn. Now we can guarantee that we get our go again. So this, the choice was made in this way. Just to withhold information, like there's a world where I don't necessarily throw the Wild Ride. I might just throw the Claw instead. Kind of depends how they block. But like in all honesty, they're at 1. So maybe it doesn't really matter how they block. That was just always going to happen. I think it's just like a habit of old more than anything. But regardless, we get to push forward in this length of game. We know the threats that we are playing with here. We still have options as well of what Spoiled Skull could have given us. We still have a Blue Dread Screamer, which would have been the follow-up on this line. So we're just pretty happy to have played through, our threat density pretty well in our deck and end up clinching the win here. So that's a little bit of a showcase of what the fresh take on Levia. I mean, it's only a couple cards off, but this is a new matchup. You got to play it a different way. I think some of the old learnings, if you played Levia versus Dromai back in the day, do hold true, and you can have a lot of fun with this matchup.